Hello, good evening. Welcome to tonight's Planning and Development Control Committee meeting. My name is Omid Miri. I'm the chair of the committee. Thanks everyone for coming and being here today. Just run you through some housekeeping points before we get to the main agenda. This meeting is being live streamed to the council's YouTube channel, so by being here, you are consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm sounds either continuously or intermittently, I will adjourn the meeting. Please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the staff fire exit, which is behind me to my right. And officers will direct you to the assembly point, which is in Riverside Gardens. And the toilets are on my left-hand side. And please, can officers introduce themselves before they're speaking? And if you just press the button on the right-hand side, this is for any speakers, the button will go green and then you'll be able to speak and be recorded. Now we move on to item 1 on the agenda, which is, apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Melton, Councillor Trey, and Councillor Carmel. And I believe Councillor Carmel is unwell. So just on behalf of the committee, we want to send our well wishes to him and wish him a swift recovery and hope to see him at the next committee. And now we move on to item 2, declaration of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, no declarations of interest. Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on 17th of September 2024. Are the minutes agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you. If that can be noted as well. That brings us to item 4, which is 100 Lily Road. Roy, could you please introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this item is in relation to 100 Lily Road. It's in relation to the demolition of the existing buildings on site to create 8 new houses. And there are some associated works with that. Just to draw attention to the addendum, there are some minor changes to the officer report, but notably on page 52, just adding extra sentences there where emphasising the overall proposals will achieve 55% on-site reduction in CO2 emissions. Let's just go through the presentation. So in the image on the screen, you can see the site highlighted in red. It's on the north side of Lily Road. The site itself is in use at the moment. It's in use as sort of sofa repairs and making cottage industry. And the buildings are single and 2-storey on site in a U-shaped format. To the north, you have the terrace of properties at 9 to 11 Bramber Court, which are residential properties, 3-storey. And then to the east, you have North End Road properties fronting the high street there, and some sort of 30 metres away. And then to the west, you have there's a single-storey commercial building immediately to the west of the site, and then beyond that is the Norman Croft Community School. Apologies, technology is frozen. Okay. So on the screen now, apologies for the delay. The site is in the Fulham regeneration area, which if you look at the left image, you can see there's a map which covers a large part of the borough, but the boundary in yellow is the Fulham regeneration area, and then it's got a sort of a dotted outline of a line which includes Fulham town centre and goes down towards the south. That is Fulham town centre, which itself is also in the Fulham regeneration area. The image on the right, there's a blue star in the middle, which highlights the location of the site, and the red boundary is the boundary for Fulham town centre and also the boundary for the Fulham regeneration area. So this is a site from an aerial view looking northward. So what you can see is two images on this one. The image at the top is intended to try and highlight the location of the buildings in relation to the site. So there's an undercroft entrance on Lily Road. Once you get past that undercroft, there is a backland site with a single-storey and two-storey buildings in a U-shaped form. And you can see the image in the foreground, which has got that sort of single-storey building on the left where my cursor is, sorry, two-storey building on the left where my cursor is. And then this L-shaped remaining area, which is the single-storey element to the buildings on the site, and then the courtyard in the middle. That's the context. And then to the rear, you've got these properties which are on Bramber Road, which are the residential properties. And you can see just on the western side of this site where my cursor is, there's a forecourt parking, which serves the commercial premises which immediately join the site. And then in sort of southwest corner of this image, there's William Gatey House, and significantly, there are no windows in that flank elevation towards the site. And just for point of reference, the boundary is here, sort of runs down where number 7 is from the top of the image. That is the boundary of the site, and it's some sort of 28 meters away from the properties in North End Road. So this is just trying to show the context and flavour in the street scene. So the site image in the top left corner, we can see the undercroft where the arrow is, entrance on Lily Road, so 3-storey terrace predominantly. The image on the top right, you can see the building of Merit, which is on the corner of North End Road and Lily Road. And then the image on the left bottom corner is Bramber Road, the properties that are residential towards the rear of the site. It's just trying to give you a flavour of what the site looks like from within. So you've got the undercroft, as I say, you can't really see the site from the street, but this is the undercroft. And then beyond that, you can see in the background, there are 2-storey buildings. And then this is a view looking towards the entrance of the site. So you can see the undercroft, and the back of those buildings are the properties fronting Lily Road. On the right-hand side, you have the 2-storey element within the site. On the left-hand side, you have the single-storey elements, and you have this sort of courtyard area centrally. And then the image on the left-hand side, again, is just trying to show you the flavour in terms of context of what's surrounding. You can see the windows in the rear elevation of the properties along Lily Road. Some of those are habitable rooms. And then you've got, again, the single-storey building on the right-hand side, again, just showing it in context to the surrounding properties. So to the rear of the site, you've got the properties in Bramber Road, which are 3-storey. And then significantly to the rear of this site, you can see there's a structure here, which is 2-storey, which serves one of the residential properties in the Lily Road frontage. So it obscures views from North End Road. So difficult to see the whole site overall. So what I try to do here is to give you an image which has an aerial shot and then of what's existing and then what's proposed. So on the left-hand side, top image, that is a 2-storey building which has got the white frontage, and then it's got a courtyard, and then this kind of corrugated roof for single-storey buildings. And then on the right-hand side, you have what's proposed. So you can see that's on the location where what I would call the western part of the site. That's a 2-storey building, and that would be replaced by a building which is very similar in height. It's essentially a 2-storey building with roof space. And you can see there's a pitched roof that's been added effectively to the top of that building. Notably as well, that building would be sunken down by about half a metre, so to reduce the overall height within the site. So effectively overall, there's an additional increase in height on that side of the site by up 2 metres. For that particular terrace. And the only other thing to draw to your attention is when you see this image on the left-hand side, there's a small gap, and I will come to it at some point, between number 11 Bramber Road, which is where my cursor is. There's a gap there of literally only between 1 metre and 1.9 metres. So that's an existing arrangement, and that building obscures views largely from number 11 Bramber. However, the proposal would reduce the mass of the building or building in that location. So it retains a two-storey element, but it would be slightly lower. So it improves the outlook and daylight from that particular location at number 11. And then the property next to it, which is slightly to the south in this location, opposite that corrugated roof, that would now face an open courtyard, and it wouldn't have interrupted views for any structures. Indeed, the views that it would have would be at an oblique angle. On the left-hand side, bottom left corner, you have the single-storey building, which hopefully you can see it's sort of a white frontage on the other side of the courtyard. And now that building would have a change in height. The existing single-storey building is 3.5 metres high. The proposed building would be single-storey to 3 metres, and then it would rise to, I think, about 6 metres, then ultimately up to about 8.5 metres. So significant thing here is that it's set off the boundary. So the highest part is within the central part of the site, away from the properties in Bramber Road and Lily Road. And although there is a terrace, I think, at one end of the flat roof, that is screened, would be obscure glazed, and would prevent any sort of overlooking. So it's, again, just to give you a flavour of the sort of context, because it's a difficult backland site. So hopefully this might help. What you see here is this is the elevation looking into the courtyard. So what I've tried to do here is to show the 45-degree lines, which we normally talk about when we talk about outlook. And so the image on the top is the, if you like, the eastern block facing the courtyard. And you can see it goes from single-storey, two-storey, then to three-storey, which is 3-storey in the central part of the site. And it's set off the boundaries by quite some distance, varying from 7 metres at first floor and 14 metres at second floor when in relation to the properties on Lily Road, and then 8 metres at first floor and 14 metres at second floor to the properties along Bramber Road. So when you do these 45-degree lines, you can see that it complies with the sort of sense of outlook and retains a sense of openness. The property then on the other, back. Obviously on the bottom of the image, you've got the 3-storey building, which is proposed. At the moment, it's 2-storey, so they're adding 1 floor. Effectively, it is that grey area which is on top of the building. So what you have here is this 45-degree line, which is trying to show where that roof would impact. Notably, when you look at that roof level, what you'll find is that it's because it's a pitched roof, so it's quite a narrow part of the building rather than the widest part of the building. It actually has quite a minimal impact on those nearest properties in Lily Road. And similarly, on the other side, this is at this end, Bramber Road. That's that 2-metre gap that I mentioned before between number 11 and the proposed development. But then beyond that, there's a 3-metre, 3-storey height, which is set away from that property. I think the important thing is if I go back to this image, you can see here, these windows are number 11. And you can see that there is already an obstruction in that location, and there would be an improvement as a result of this development. And although the footprint of this 3-storey element increases slightly by about 1 metre towards the centre of the site, it's set about 7 metres away from the properties in Bramber Road. So the sense of outlook, if you like, is retained. And then I turn to residential amenity in terms of that impact of that proposed massing. Move this image. So on the left-hand side, top image, you can see the green mass is the existing building. And on the right-hand side, you can see the orange mass is the proposed building. And this significant thing here is that all the windows that you can see at the back there in Bramber Road essentially are unaffected by the development because of the setting off the boundary, which means it's basically not harmful. Similarly, when you turn it the other way around, so these at the bottom image on the left-hand corner is Lily Road. And again, you see the buildings in green are the existing buildings, and then the proposed building is in orange on the right-hand side. And notably, again, the comparison between existing and proposed is very similar. Yes, there is an increase in height of 2 meters on the 3-story elements, but it's relatively modest because it's only 2 meters. The overall height goes from 7 meters to 9 meters, but it's in a pitched form, so it's actually quite modest impact. So overall, I think on-site judgment in line with our policies, we think it's acceptable. So if you want to take the headlines from this, the number 11 has an improved outlook. And then number 9, the courtyard has an open aspect, so that's not adversely affected, and overall it's acceptable. In terms of BRE, daylight and sunlight, the proposals are policy compliant, so it meets all the standards. There's no adverse impact. And then this one is just trying to sort of show what the impact would be in terms of the properties to the west of the site. So I think I mentioned earlier that to the west of the site, you've got non-residential uses. So there's a commercial use immediately to the west, and then beyond that is the school. And then in the sort of southwest corner here, you've got William Gatey House, which has no windows in its flank. So when the proposed elevation that's shown here, this is the elevation that would be facing that westward direction. So it does contain some roof terraces and does contain some windows, but it's facing non-residential use. And then we turn then to the other direction. So you've got, so you can see the courtyard here, and this is the single-story building. And then the single-story building is separated between those properties in North End Road by this sort of 2-story intermediate structure, which serves the back of a property in Lily Road. And those properties in Lily Road are some 28 meters away. And there is a terrace proposed in the rear here. So you can just see my cursor. That's a terrace that's proposed in the rear, which would be screened. But again, that wouldn't cause any loss of privacy to any of the neighbouring properties, particularly as it's, got non-residential uses to the rear anyway, and would be at an oblique angle. It's just trying to show a flavour of some of the footprint and the floor space of the proposed floor space areas. So you've got the building on the left, which is a 3-story element, the building on the right, which is a 2-story element, which rises to 3 in the middle. And you can see as you move to the middle, the footprint of the area above the sort of building on the east side of the site is reduced. And then as you go onto the second floor, the footprint of the building on the east side is reduced even further. So it's basically set quite some way off the boundaries. This is one of the typical units you can see in the site. So you've got some bedroom accommodation and other facilities. But yeah, good standard of accommodation, meets the London Plan standards. The reason for showing this is just to show a cross-section of the site, but probably the most important thing to point out here is this on, for example, on the cross-section B, you've got a reduction in the height overall because the building is sunken. So because that sinking then means it has less impact in terms of outlook and harm to neighbours. That's been part of the consideration. And then turn to climate change matters. I think I've already mentioned there's a 55% reduction overall in CO2 emissions, and there's air source, ground source heat pumps, as well as solar panels on the roof, which is shown in this image. And then in terms of materials, they are conditioned, but there's a sort of an artist's impression of what the courtyard or views would look like. And then the images on the left show the sort of materials, and notably some of these windows are obscure glazed to sort of prevent overlooking between some of the properties. And that's it. So essentially, in principle, we think the development is okay because the buildings on site are very poor quality. The existing users were going to relocate somewhere else in the borough. The cost of refurbishment is prohibitive. This is a backland site. There's no heritage constraints, and there would be a visual improvement compared to the existing arrangement. There were 4 objections to the proposals in terms of outlook, privacy, light, massing, noise, and consultation. In terms of outlook, on-site judgment, as I said already, it's acceptable. We don't think there's any harm in terms of privacy, neither in terms of daylight and sunlight. There are conditions attached about noise. The massing is deemed to be acceptable. In terms of consultation, we did the applicant carried out their own pre-application consultation with the proposals. We carried out our own consultation as part of the application, and there was quite wide coverage, and there was some door knocking involved as part of the pre-application consultation with the applicants, knocking on all the doors around the property, as well as a live website, as well as a site meeting to encourage people to come along to visit and see the proposals. So that was all done before the application came in. The quality of the accommodation is okay. There are no issues with highways. It's car free. We've had no objections from our highways colleagues, subject to conditions, and there's some mayoral contribution, but significantly we've got a contribution of 400,000 towards improvements to the public realm, which include improvements to the local park, because some of the units don't provide quite enough amenity space, and there's also a contribution towards affordable housing, and there's some monitoring, etc. So yeah, from our perspective, officer's perspective, we're recommending that the application be approved. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roy, for your presentation. Now we'll move on to speakers. I believe we have two speakers in support. We have Mr. Wallace and Mr. Davidson. If you'd like to come to the seat at the front, and you have 3 minutes between you, however you'd like to split that up, and whenever you're ready, the button on the right-hand side will go green. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've spoken to Mr. Wallace and he said I can speak for the two of us. I'm Andrew Davidson from Architects Studio PDP. I've read the report to committee and I think it's very thoroughly put together, and Roy's presentation was very helpful, so it won't be any longer than necessary. The proposal for Bartolozzi Mews has been carefully developed and evolved with an initial pre-app meeting to talk about broad principles in late 2022. Then we had a further pre-app to consider initial proposals in mid-23, and we did a public consultation in the spring of this year before we submitted the planning application. We've developed the layout of the proposed houses to reflect the existing arrangement of buildings on the site, maintaining open space in the middle, providing access and outlook for future occupants, and improving the general outlook for neighbours. Scheme will provide 8 new good quality homes. We put living rooms on the upper floor where they can benefit from good daylight and terraces. And we've included generous space under sloping roofs as an attractive feature which reflects the lofty character of the first floor of the current building. If people have been on site and walked around, they'll appreciate that. We carefully considered daylight and sunlight, outlook, privacy of neighbouring properties, setting of the new buildings, and we set the buildings back from the boundaries to maintain good light and views. We provided screening to external terraces when necessary to ensure privacy. When considering access for residents, visitors, and deliveries, we're proposing a change of the existing solid timber doors on the entrance archway to a decorative gate, which will have clear views through. The landscaping's been designed by Chelsea Award winner Andy Sturgeon to create an attractive environment for residents and pleasant outlook for neighbours. Windows facing into the mews will be staggered to minimise overlooking, and additional privacy will be provided by the landscaping. We haven't provided any parking on site. We've agreed that future residents will not be able to apply for parking permits unless they are wheelchair bound. And we're therefore providing generous storage for bikes and scooters. 3 of the new homes will have level access suitable for wheelchairs and will be easily adaptable for residents who are wheelchair users. And the development has been designed on sound sustainable principles with high levels of thermal insulation, solar panels on the roof to provide on-site generation of electricity, heat pumps below ground to provide heating, and soft landscaping, green roofs, and on-site water storage to minimize flow of water into the drains. The contemporary style of the homes, which you were shown, reflects traditional forms, materials, and details found in the area, with the courtyard facing elevations arranged as 8 attractive individual houses. I'll be happy to answer any questions and commend the proposal to the committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. If you'd like to return to your seat, thank you so much. And if you wouldn't mind, sorry, just turning the mic off. Oh, it's okay. Councillor Walsh can do it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. In that case, we will move now on to committee members' questions for officers. And who'd like to start the questioning? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, just more of a comment. I mean, it does seem this proposal has put in considerable efforts to minimise the impact to neighbouring properties throughout the design. That's just a comment more than anything. My only concern really with this proposal is that the properties will be somewhat sunken, and it's purely on the risk of flooding to those specific properties. Has any additional measures been included, such as no return valves into those properties, just for the benefit of those future residents? That's my question.
The short answer to your question is yes. So those measures are secured as part of the flood risk assessment as well. Yeah.
No further questions then.
Yep, Councillor Pascoe-Tibore.
Thank you very much. These are attractive houses. How wide apart will they be from each other in terms of face to face?
I think, just bear with me a second. I think it's about 6. I'll just tell you exactly. Just bear with me a second. So at the moment, the spaces between the buildings is between 5.5 and 7 meters. And as a result of the proposed, it would be between, let's start again, between 6.5 and 7 meters at the moment. And it would be between 5.5 and 7 meters as proposed. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's a great relief. Could I also ask about the external space? I note that for quite a few of them, this falls below recommended standards, although there will be the mitigation of a presumably shared external area. Could you just guide us on how far short they fall of those standards?
I mean, to be honest, with the exception of, I think it's 3 units, they all fall short. And it's because it's a backland site, it's in a town centre, so it's obviously struggles, and the minimum requirement is 5 square metres, so it doesn't achieve that. So one of the good things is that all of these units are a good size in terms of their internal floor area. So there are minimum standards on page 35 of the report. And the units are all above those minimum standards, and in one case quite considerably. So for example, unit 5, the minimum is 79 square meters, and it's actually 112 square meters. So the internal floor space is quite good for that unit. And then obviously recognizing that those individual units don't have their own space, the forecourt is there for communal use. So the communal floor space is for everyone to use. And then over and above that, then is the mitigation, so contribution towards the local park.
Thanks very much. And obviously, if you have a communal space within a courtyard area, then the potential for cumulative noise is quite big as well. Have you done any specific assessment of that?
We've not done a specific assessment of that, but we've done assessment overall for the quality of the accommodation and this satisfactory sound installation. So that addresses any concern there. But obviously, if people have their windows open in the summer, there will be some noise. But it is a sort of gated entrance, so there won't be lots of toing and froing. It's effectively a cul-de-sac, so there won't be much toing and froing through the site, as it were. So yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And it looks like it's basically what a sort of Muse street would look like. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. So the design is I can show you on the image, is intended to be a Muse effect, and I think it's shown on the artist image, which you can see on the screen at the moment on the right hand side. That's the sort of desired effect. Obviously, there are conditions to try and secure materials, but notably as well, you've got a gated entrance, I think, at the moment to the site, so you don't really see it from the street at all. So you can see the image on the left-hand side, that's the undercroft, and when, at the moment the gates close, you don't get to that part of the site as a commercial use, so it sort of opens it out into a semi-public space. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I am reassured that part of the Section 106 sort of funding that's been secured will go, as you say, to making improvements to the local park. So while it would be difficult to get more sort of communal space in a site like this, there is a park very nearby that will benefit from this application.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other questions? Councillor Schwartz-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered if you could go back to some of the pictures showing the structure today. And whilst you do that, so in the pack, you tell us that this is a site that's been used since what you refer to as the 20th century, which I suppose we're all from. But that's not really the case, because that alludes to a very famous engraver who worked in London. It's an industrial site that probably goes back to the 19th century. These are buildings that have certain merit. They are a testimony of our industrial heritage, particularly in the area. We're very proud of our Muse in West Ken Ward. In the last committee, possibly to you, I asked this question when we were reviewing a similar premises that was used for commercial purposes that looked quite run down. And I sort of asked you the question of, well, so I'm going to buy a commercial premises, let it kind of get a bit shabby beyond repair, and then say to you, well, too bad, right? Can't really do anything with it. We're just going to have to raise it. And that's our history that disappears. Are you satisfied that we weren't able to do anything with this site and preserve it?
Again, the short answer is yes. If you look at the report, page 33 in the report, there's a paragraph there which talks about the conditions of the building on the site. So the buildings themselves are no longer fit for purpose. Some of the buildings, I think, as I've shown in the images, they have a thin metal clad roof with asbestos. The buildings themselves are have dilapidating fabric, and it's got a very restricted, narrow entrance, which for modern day businesses is not necessarily ideal. But in support of that, the applicants did provide a structural engineering appraisal, and that appraisal showed that the buildings aren't actually not structurally sound. So that's quite significant. In addition to that, they did a marketing report, or carried out a marketing report to establish whether or not there were any takers in the locality to make use of the site. And what they found in summary was that there were other better buildings in nearby locations which were struggling to get demand. And this is even poorer condition though. So even if it was refurbished, it would still struggle to get uptake. So on the basis of that, we felt that, we could lose this commercial use in this location, and also the business itself is relocating somewhere else in the borough. I mean, that's their proposals. Obviously, we can't guarantee that, but obviously through the Section 106 mitigations, there are contributions towards, affordable housing, which is, one of our priorities of the site. So it's that balance to be achieved. Yeah.
So you're convinced that the current state of the building isn't through deliberate lack of upkeep?
Correct. Yes.
Good. Can I? Yeah. Thank you, Chair. To continue on items you've put in the addendum, so you tell us that the scheme presents, which is really welcome the quantification of the environmental benefits, channeling my inner Councillor Harcourt as always. You tell us of a 10% reduction in CO2 emissions through measures including passive ventilation, but also a 55% on-site reduction in CO2 emissions. Is this compared to the current building, or is this compared to if we were to have a similar housing scheme, just the council hadn't pushed for all these measures?
The benchmark is the current situation. So that's the benchmark. So to try and reduce what the situation is at the moment. So in terms of policy, there's no requirement to actually achieve any of these targets, but because of the nature of the design of the buildings, the material fabric, the insulation, the solar panels, the ground source heat pumps, all of those things have helped to sort of improve the CO2 reduction on site. So yes, that's it's a very good achievement, I think, for a site like this.
So I think it's probably worth noting your good work as well as the applicant's goodwill on that matter. Thank you. I wanted to talk to you about the construction management plan. The roundabout that is at the intersection of Lely Road and Northern Road is notably dangerous. This is a site that has a very narrow entrance that won't let any truck. There isn't any on-street parking. And one of our other very environmentally sound schemes that this committee voted for, which is just down the road at the West Kent Community Hall, Tenants Hall, in fact, will be undergoing construction at the same time. How are we going to manage that?
Well, the applicant is required to submit a demolition logistics plan together with a construction logistics plan to our highways team. Those are secured by condition, and as part of the service that's provided by highways team, they review development in the locality and try to coordinate it. So it will be done as part of that review and when we deal with the submission of the details.
Thank you. And a last question is, if we could go back to where you look at the BRE, which is the sunlight element, particularly for the people living at number 9, 10, 11 Bramber Road. So you tell us that for number 11, things will actually improve because the building that is currently in front of them will go, which is welcome. But for number 9, that's not the case. So I appreciate that you say to us in this pack that they are compliant, but could you tell us how big the reduction in sunlight is?
So you can see on the image on the screen number 11, 9 and 7. And notably, you can see the 2-story building on the left-hand side with its white frontage. And then you've got this corrugated roof in the middle, which is single story. And then you've got the sort of asbestos roof on the right-hand side. And number 11, that gap between number 11 and the building there is literally only 1.9 meters at most, and even reduces to about a meter. Because that building is already there, that level of interruption, if you like, of daylight and sunlight is, if you like, the benchmark. Then what's been proposed is, I'll just show this image. So if you like, this is an interpretation of that. So this is number 11 here. And that's the structure that's there at the moment with its pitched roof. And you can see on the right-hand side, that equivalent image for the proposed building. The actual pitch, if you like, is dropped because you can see more of the you can see more of this flat roof at first floor behind. You see that? So that's more exposed because that overall height has been reduced, which means the windows here have a reduced impact, and also because of its plot width, that number 11 doesn't actually, it's not actually worse off, it's actually better off as a result of this development. Similarly, number 9, which faces the courtyard, and although the courtyard buildings are single story, when you talk about daylight and sunlight from a single story development, you can see that number 9 has its own rear projection in this location, and because it's opposite an directly open space, there's no adverse impact. And similarly, when you look at number 7, the separation between the rear of elevation of number 7 and the setback on the boundary at first floor and second floor, that centralized element, is between 7 at first floor and 14 at second floor. So it's quite splayed. So the sense of openness is retained. And logically, because of that, the BRE means that when tested, there's no adverse impact in terms of light to any of those properties. So it's compliant with the standards. So when you talk about, for example, reduction, the important thing in terms of target and meeting targets is to ensure that any new development does not reduce light by more than 80% of its former value. And this development wouldn't do that. So I can't give you an exact figure to say how much it would be reduced by if there are any reductions, but I can tell you that it would be compliant with the BRE, which is the standard that we apply.
Okay, so this will not be a reduction for number 9 of more than 80% of what Sunlight they currently get in their property.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a reduction for number 11, number 9, or number 7, or any of those properties there. Yeah.
Okay, and something else I noticed in what you showed to us, and I can't remember what slide that is, sorry, versus what the applicant gave me, sent us by email too. It appeared to me that there were planters surrounding I'm particularly interested in the terrace that will be facing number 7, which is in red on the right. I seem to see planters on drawings, but I only see glazed glass on yours, but I don't know the height of the glass. Could you?
Yeah, the height of the glass is 1.7 meters high, which is a standard we would normally apply to prevent overlooking. But it's screening, so I'm not sure. I mean, we would have conditions to ensure that it's obscure glazed screens to prevent privacy. So I'm not sure about any other proposals because it's not included in the pack that we have as approved drawings, but so they might be illustrative.
No, this is fine, thank you. And the terrace of 7 is slightly lower than a terrace.
That's correct. Yes.
I suppose that even at 1.7 for someone who is 180, 190, actually wouldn't see down, would they?
Correct. Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you. No more questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Just to go back to the point about construction and demolition. So do we know what the main access to the site will be for construction and demolition? Will it be from Lily Road or is there back access to the site?
There's no other access.
Only Lily Road.
It's only Lily Road. So when you see the site, you can see here on the screen, the access is through this undercroft. And it wouldn't be the first site that's had that sort of arrangement where development's been carried out. They just have to, obviously unload along Lily Road because there's no other option unless they make arrangements to provide some sort of, I don't know, deliveries over the side of the wall with the commercial building on the western side of the site. But, the actual frontage of the site is on Lily Road. But obviously that's something that hasn't yet been determined, but we would normally expect it to be from Lily Road. But that could be something that could be explored. I just don't know at this point. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a fantastic scheme, fantastic application. I think it's exactly the kind of sort of urban intensification we need to see. I'm very reassured by the 55% on-site CO2 reduction, the £400,000 Section 106 agreement. So I will be voting for, and I want to commend both the applicants and the officers for their work on this. Do we have any other questions before we move on to voting? No? No further questions. Okay, great. In that case, we'll move on to voting.
Sorry, Susan Chair.
Yes.
Just through the chair. I think it was mentioned earlier there were financial contributions secured towards the local park. I think Norman Park was mentioned in affordable housing. I should just clarify that the contribution of 400,000 hasn't been allocated as yet, but it's as the committee report says at 10.8. It's towards public realm, environmental improvements, affordable housing and economic development to support the council's industrial strategy. So that's not allocated just yet, but it is ring fenced to those areas. And there is an internal governance process where 106 monies are allocated.
Thank you for that important clarification. Yeah, Councillor Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. So when you say it's ring fenced to the area, that means the money will be spent in the area of where the scheme is, or do you mean the borough?
I mean the borough, so it's ring fenced to those items, if you like, those areas of expenditure rather than geographically, obviously within the borough.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, final comments from officers or committee members? No. Okay. We'll now move on to voting on recommendation 1, which is on page 9 of the report. Councillor Walsh, will you be voting for, against, or not voting? Councillor Souslous? For. Councillor Pascu-Tabure? For. Councillor Chevot-Verdier?
For.
And I'll also be voting for. So recommendation 1 has been approved. And now we vote on recommendation 2, which is also on page 9. Councillor Walsh?
For.
Councillor Souslous?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tabure? For. Councillor Chevot-Verdier?
For.
And I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we'll move on to item 5, which is Beaconsfield Walk. And Roy, I think it's your report again, so please take it away.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application to use part of the public highway for 2 traders' market stalls. It's a council's own application, which is why it's coming to committee. There are 2 locations shown on the left-hand side where the stalls would be located. And you can see those same images on the right-hand side in a wider context. One stall was initially intended for a coffee use and one stall was intended for flower use, but as we discovered, the applicants have found that there's been if you like, an intermittent use of the coffee use, which means that it's not very well used, and so therefore both stalls would actually be used by a flower seller, and it would be the same flower seller rather than 2 different ones. This is what's being proposed. So you can see Beaconsfield Walk, which is adjacent to the Parsons Green tube station, which is on the left-hand side. And there'll be one stall in the forecourt and one just about where that other person is walking, maybe slightly further ahead. And I say these will be restricted in terms of hours of use, in terms of nature of use. And there has been a temporary permission which was granted back in 2019 by a committee for a similar location, not quite the same. So just for clarity, there you can see there are 2 dots on the right-hand side. The pitch 1, let's call it closest to Parsons Green, doesn't change. That's in exactly the same location. Pitch 2 is opposite number 1 Purser's Cross Road, but actually previously we approved it for adjacent to number 7 Purser's Cross Road. So it's moved location slightly, but it's in the same vicinity. But the important thing to note is that in that 24 months when that activity was granted and was operating, there were no complaints from any neighbours. There were no complaints that reached our environmental protection team or highways, and indeed our design in highways and environmental protection team have no objections. This structure is sort of set on wheels and sits on the pavement, and if it needs to be moved for street cleaning, can be moved for street cleaning. The only thing just to say that this is trying to formalise a current arrangement because there's been an intermittent use of the coffee stall. The current user has aggregated the site, if you like, to try and create a slightly larger area, which is not ideal. But the important thing is this is not what you would be approving. This is not the arrangement. So if anybody has seen this on site, this is not the arrangement, just to make that absolutely clear. So officer's recommendation is to approve. That's it.
Thank you very much. Was there anything in the addendum that you wanted to alert us to?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry. I should have said the recommendation on page 59 should be changed to the usual recommendations that we have, usual recommendation of 1 and 2. And then also on page 63, it's just making clear that essentially what I've just said, that pitch 1 stays the same, pitch 2 is a slightly different location, and both stalls will be for flower selling rather than the coffee use, which has been discontinued. And the hours of use are slightly shorter than what was previously approved, basically Monday, Saturday, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m, same, but reduced hours on a Sunday between 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. rather than finishing at 5. That's it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Nope, no questions. Okay, then we'll move straight on to voting. Firstly, we'll vote on recommendation 1, which has been corrected in the addendum, which is available online. Councillor Walsh. For. Councillor Souslous. For. Councillor Pascu-Tibure. For. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
For.
I'll also be voting for, and recommendation 2, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Souslous. For. Councillor Pascu-Tibure. For. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
For.
And I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 6, Fulham Gasworks. And Jacques, would you like to introduce the report whenever you're ready? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for the delay. The application site is known as Kings Road Park, which is the former Fulham gasworks site. This aerial view shows the site and the boundary of the site. This was when the site was actually completely cleared, apart from the gas holder number 2 and the 2 listed buildings with war memorials. The application is partly within a conservation area, as can be seen here. And this also shows the listed buildings, the gas holder number 2, which I just mentioned, and also the war memorials. In 2019, planning permission was granted for a part detailed, part outline consent. This was for the demolition of the existing buildings and also redevelopment of the site for residential-led mixed-use development, comprising of up to approximately 1,800 units, of which 646 would be affordable. With that, it's commercial floor space, some new open space, pedestrian routes, access to and amenity areas, and basement level car park. This image shows the detailed phase, which is phase 1, and also the 14 development plots can be seen there, which is within the outline element of the application. This is an image which shows again phase 1 there, and you could see the parameters of the buildings expected within the outline element as consented in 2019. In terms of an update and progress on site, the blue plots indicate the units which have obtained detailed consent, of which the reserved matters have been approved. This image shows the current construction update. The area highlighted in red shows phase 1, which is actually complete and fully occupied. And also to the south of the image shows building plots D1 and D2, which is aimed to be completed in the new year and occupied by Stoll, which is housing for veterans. This is a Section 73 application, which is to vary Condition 4 and Condition 5, which relates to the design codes and parameter plans for the consent. In terms of, it's mainly focuses on phase 4, which can be seen here on the image highlighted in red, which is the 3 tallest elements of the master plan. The first change is to merge the 3 towers which is H1, H2, and H3, which can be seen there, to merge them to deliver 2 tall buildings. There's also an increase in plots A1 and H2 building floor plates, which is to address the new fire regulations. There's an increase in the shoulder height of plot H2 by approximately 8 meters. And there's also an increase in the number of floors for plots H1 from 37 to 38 stories. However, you'll see later, there's no change in the maximum parameter heights. And then lastly, there's a redistribution of land uses within phase 4. There's also some minor changes to the indicative landscaping, which is within the phases as listed on the screen. This is the 2019 consent for phase 4. As you can see here, buildings H1, H2, and H3. And then the next one will be the current proposals, which is for plots H1 and H2. You can see here that if I flick between the 2 and the 3 proposals, for the 2 buildings, there's clearly a benefit in terms of a much wider access, which is an enhanced connection towards Imperial Wharf Station. There's also an enhanced connection between the listed buildings and the public park. And there's also this increase in this visual corridor between the buildings and gas holder number 2. This is just an image to show again the 2019 scale and form of the expected buildings within the parameter plans and with the relevant heights. And that then will change to a 2-story element with a lower podium block of 7 stories. In terms of the master plan, we can see the 2019 versus the 2024 proposals on screen, which shows how the 3 stories versus the 2-story element would sit within the wider master plan. The increase in floor plates, as mentioned before, is mainly a reason because of the recent fire regulations changes, and this is that a second staircase needs to be introduced. The images on the screen shows the consented floor plate to the left and the middle floor plate, which shows what an impact a second staircase and additional services would have on that floor plate, which would not make it viable to deliver. The third image there shows the current proposals, which is a second staircase, but also merging the volume of H3 into the two towers. This is the 2019. We look at the floors, number of floors as consented. But the next image then shows how that changes to two towers. If I flick between the two again, there's no change in the overall height of H2, although the applicant has managed to optimize the floors and introduce one additional floor for the highest H2 tower. There's also an increase in approximately 8 meters, as mentioned, in the shoulder of H2, and optimization in the shoulder of H1, which also delivers another additional 1 floor within the shoulder height. Apologies for the small images here, but this is the redistribution of land uses. And if I can focus here, it shows ground floor and first floor. So the top two images is again the 2019 versus the current proposals. The main change there is if I see the cursor there, which is to phase 4, which is a change from commercial to mostly residential at ground floor. And in terms of, there's other updates have taken place. And if you look at D1 here, that was actually delivered as residential. So the opportunity was just used to update the plans to residential rather than commercial. The changes to indicative landscape strategy. This is again a 2019 proposal with the 3 towers. And if I flick to the next image, which shows the 2 tower option, and as mentioned there, you could see the connectivity, the east-west route, which improves, and then also opens up to the south towards the listed buildings. One major benefit in terms of the current proposals is the public park will increase by 488 square meters. As you can see here, again, the 2019 versus the current proposals. Another major benefit is by removing one of the towers, that results in much better sunlight and daylight into the public park, as can be seen here, the increase in green towards the park area. There's also a proposal to change the material palette within the design codes. On the left-hand side, you can see it's a much lighter palette, which was proposed in 2019. Currently, the current proposals is to have a more terracotta, richer, darker color for the 2 towers and the podium building. If we look at the indicative schemes, which could be delivered by the revised design codes, the indicative scheme in 2019 can be seen to the left, which again is that expressed frame with much lighter colors. And on the right-hand side, it's the current proposals, which is the darker color and the slightly larger floor plates, but only 2 towers. There are some benefits in terms of long distance views, although in some of the views, it is clearly noticeable that the floor plates has increased in size. This is from a view from Brompton Cemetery. You could see there the 3 towers, and on the right-hand side, it's just the 2 towers. Another important view is from the Imperial Square, which is the nearest residential units to the site. On the left-hand side, you could see the H3 building, which is located there. And although on the right-hand side, the H2 tower comes slightly closer, there is that loss of that additional tower. This is just a visual kind of summary of the benefits that will be delivered by the scheme. As mentioned, there's an increase in the local in the public park. There's improvement to the sky visibility, and there's a substantial increase in sunlight into the park. And also the distance between the gas holder and the phase 4 buildings will improve by 1 meter. Then this image just shows the enhanced connectivity between the listed buildings and the park. And this shows the east-west corridor, which changes from 14 meters, which actually increases to 23 meters. And there's also a optimization in terms of dual aspect units given the form of the current buildings. Officers recommend approval of this scheme subject to section 106 and conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. I believe we had a speaker who has waived. Oh, sorry. Was there anything in the addendum that you wanted to allow us to?
Apologies. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is some very minor changes in the addendum, but the main change there is the revised drawings, which has been updated up until this morning. So.
Thanks very much. So I can see the speaker has waived their right to speak, but if they are here and they do want to speak, then I'm happy for them to do that. No? Okay, no worries. Great. In that case, we'll move on to questions to officers. And I just want to say that I am very reassured that there is no reduction in residential units, so that they've been able to achieve the second staircase without any reduction. And obviously all the additional benefits that you mentioned as well to design and landscaping and sunlight into the public park. So that's very reassuring to me. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Chafot-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. I went and looked at this is a question about the consultation process. I went and looked into the original pack when this first came to committee, and I found that at the time there had been 78 representations, a residents association petition with 18 signatures, and many more residents objecting to proposals on a variety of grounds. And I think your slide about the benefits, I mean, there were quite a few, I don't know, perfect, thank you. Lack of park, well, that's kind of tick, that improves it. Loss of sunlight, that's an improvement. There's lots of, when I look at the list of representations that have been made, that slide really is good at actually showing this is a much better scheme. And there is only one representation in this pack. So would the consultation process have been the same for this application? Would essentially the same residents have been consulted as they were in 2019?
Yes, the public consultation was exactly the same, and it also included people that wasn't initially consulted, but they've written in and they were also consulted on the current application, and we only received one, as you mentioned.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Just to clarify that, what Jack means is there actually more letters got sent at this time because some people already moved into the development in the meantime. So there are over 2,000 individual letters this time, about 1,800, I think, first time around.
And you didn't receive any representations from the people who have already moved in?
No, the only one I could see, the address given, I think, is part of the development, from what I can tell. And it wasn't so much an objection as a question about where they'd located the affordable units. So, yeah.
I can just state that is the one received was from the adjacent Chelsea Creek development, which is the new tower, which is also just very recently been occupied. Yeah.
And that one single objection, that's the one you're referring to, yeah? Yeah, okay. Yeah, Councillor Pascagoula.
Thank you very much. The thing that was most striking to me about this is that the revised construction programme is now 5 years shorter, which seems to me astonishingly impressive. Could you talk us a little bit about how that will work in practice?
This does reflect the overall master plan, so it's not just phase 4, but it is the overall master plan. I think there were some previous phases in terms of plots D1 and D2 that did not have basements, so that kind of made it quicker to deliver those units. And I think they've just passed on. So, but the developers confirmed that they can improve on the initially thought the program by 5 years and overall, which is great for neighbours because that's less noise, less traffic, construction. Yeah.
Jacques, if you could go back to the slide just showing the parts of the site that have planning approval. There were some highlighted in blue and there were others that were not highlighted in blue. Yeah. So what's the yellow?
So I should have mentioned the yellow is the two listed buildings that you could see in the centre of the site.
Okay. And if you could let me know what here has finished construction, what's people are living in, which one of those?
So what you cannot see is the phase 1, which doesn't have the plots on them, but there's 3 plots on phase 1, A1, A2, and A3. Those have been completed, and it's 343 units have been occupied. Okay. And then plots D1 and D2 will very shortly be occupied in the new year.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. It's just more of a comment. I've made this comment before about larger developments. And obviously it's very welcome about cycle storage, which is obviously very important. But there has obviously been issues previously in the borough as well of e-bikes and e-scooters being charged at higher levels in apartment buildings. So if I can ask or just make the comment that it would be encouraging to see if there could be some provision for the charging of e-bikes or e-scooters, or the forbidding of the charging of them within residential spaces, given that obviously this is coming back in part to be compliant with fire safety regulations, and that'd be good to see if it's possible.
Okay, any other comments or questions? No? Okay, in that case, we'll move on to voting on recommendation 1, which is on page 71 of the report. Councillor Walsh.
4.
Councillor Souslous.
4.
Councillor Pascal-Touberay.
4.
Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
4.
And I'll also be voting for. So recommendation 1 has been approved, and recommendation 2 also on page 71. Councillor Walsh. Councillor Souslous.
4.
Councillor Pascal-Touberay.
4.
Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
4.
And I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end. I'd like to thank everyone for attending or watching tonight's meeting. The draft minutes will be published and formally approved at our next meeting, which is on the 5th of November, 2024. And if you have any queries or questions concerning the applications in the report, please contact the case officer in the application